Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for coming out for Bobbie Suarez's Thesis defense. Bobbie was raised in Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma and joined the Army as a medic in 2004. He served for 4 years in the Total Force duty in Iraq. After he completed his service, Bobbie attended Texas A&M University at Galveston, my alma mater, and yeah, Giga Maggie, and actually worked with a gentleman that I did my master's degree with, who was on faculty there now, as well as who was on my master's committee back in the day. So Bobbie came highly recommended to me when he graduated in 2017 with a Bachelor's of Science in Marine Biology, with minors in chemistry, as well as diving methods and equipment. He joined us out here in Hawaii with his wife, Jai, who is here today, and his 2 children, Chloe and Brooklyn, both cute as little buttons. Bobbie has had a long journey to get to this point, so I'm very proud of the fact that he's standing here today where he is now. If you'd asked him, what is it, 4 years ago? Yeah, 4. Time to maybe birth leaves of that. You'd asked him 4 years ago if he was going to, do a project on modeling and computer programming, he would have had a look on his face that just complete disgust. He's a field biologist wanting to be in the water, underwater all the time. And so his evolution to this point here has been really something to watch. And I'm very proud of the work that he's going to present today. And with that, I'm going to let you take it away, Bob. Oh, before he does, though, acknowledge his committee, none of which were able to attend in person today. So joining us on Zoom from the University of Hawaii at Hilo, Dr. John Burns. Joining us from the Oregon Cooperative Fish and Wildlife Research Unit at Oregon State University, Dr. Jim Peterson. And joining us all the way from the New Hampshire Cooperative Fish and Wildlife, Vermont, I'm sorry, geez. Sorry, Mark, the Vermont Cooperative Fish and Wildlife Research Unit, we have Dr. Mark Henderson. And so now, Bobbie, we're going to take it away.
So, good morning. My name is Bobbie Suarez. I'm sponsored once again. So, today we're just going to set up this So, the title is, as you read, occupancy detection coefficient for reef fish. So I've had lots of jobs. So it looks like it's off the job. Your job is to count. Didn't count correctly. Tell me how long they are. Tell me every single species. There you got it. Okay. So just for the sake of time, let's say you got 100% right. You have every single species, every single fish. You come up with a mean biomass. So how much weight of those fish is there by species? Okay, let's say you do 150 times. You go out 150 times around island, you survey them. So 125 of them. You're going to take that mean biomass density, you're going to apply it to a reef. So we're saying that the current method used by we'll get into that here in a minute. But the current method right now says that the distribution of these fish should look like this on the landscape. It's a normal distribution. Where the majority of them, we count them all right. You guys got them all correct. You guys counted all the fish, you got all the length, the biomass density correct. But in reality, if you've ever been fishing in the country, you just want to go out and see some birds. The reality is this is going to be more of what we're looking at. It's going to be zero. You're putting up a lot of zero in your data set. So right now, the current method of how we analyze the biomass density for these fish doesn't account for the zeros in the landscape. What it's doing is just saying that it's just evenly distributed across the reef within a habitat depth strategy. So why is that? Well, as you can tell, sometimes this isn't easy to count fish. This is the Darwin's Arch and Bronchus. As you can see, the current is a little strong. a little. Bubbles for you. So with that being said, this is just an extreme example of why we might have issues. How do you cover reef? The water could be merged. It could be, there could be huge schools around you. As you'll see here in a minute, I mean, literally, it's very low. That's just one of the issues with it. Another one is that terrestrial biologists figured this out a long time ago, that there is zeros on the line. That there, sometimes you usually come up with, I mean, especially like, everybody used camera traps before, okay? But they come up and they figured out, okay, so tigers. They're out there, so, hey, tigers don't come up in camera traps a whole lot. American toad. Even local Hawaiian birds. We say that, hey, sometimes you just won't come up with zeros, and we account for that. But right now, it's not really done in marine fire. That's what's important. So why is it important? Well, managers rely on it. Either you be undermanaging a species. If you're undermanaging a species, you don't really dedicate resources to that species that might need it. You're not really accounting for why a population might be in decline. And if it does start to decline and you finally catch it, it might be too late because you haven't put the resources towards that species. Or we might be overmanaging it. If I would have thought actually, so if you're overmanaging, what's going to happen is that you're going to dedicate a lot of resources, a lot of financial priorities to species that may not necessarily need it. And kind of coming back to undermanaged species, you're taking away from those who couldn't force the overmanaged species. So there's three of the main points of why it's important to account for zeros within the landscape. So how do we come up with these? Well, the data that I use, they use stationary point counts. Two divers go down. They have cylinders. They rotate around the cylinders. They count all the fish to see, and then they estimate the length of the fish. And they use this really fancy graph to come up with length to weight ratio or length to weight, and then they calculate the weight of the fish within their cylinders. So they're randomized on hard bottom. So they go out and they find a hard bottom, usually using backscatter data, sonar, stuff like that. If the divers down, they do it down, it's randomized. As I said, they estimate the length, and only fishes that enter the cylinder or are already in the cylinder are counted. And they don't count fish that are outside the little cylinder. They don't count fish that might come in and out, they just count them. So they're supposed to. So the data I use is from the 2010-2017 NOAA CREP survey. I'm not for sure if CREP is the right acronym for it. I've been told about 15 different ones. So just know if I mention NOAA CREP data in this, I'm actually talking about the data in and all 2017 data set. So it was conducted from 2010 to 2017. I covered 5 regions of the Pacific, Main Hawaiian Islands, Northwest Hawaiian Islands, Pacific Remote Island area, which is Palmyra, Johnson's Hole, Howland Baker, and Jarvis. Also America Samoa, Northwest Hawaiian Islands, and Mariana Site. So for the purpose of the study, I did 8 subset target families. Acanthoria, sugarfish, frigidae, jack, Sidontidae, the butterfly fish. Liverdae, the raptors, the Thermidae, around here we call them moose. Vaginidae, your snappers, Sparidae, your parrotfish, and Sarandae, the sea bass or boogers. Habitat was reported as categorical by depth. So what I mean by categories is reef, spur and groove, hard bottom, cement, I believe it's called. Sites are only surveyed once. That's really important outcome into account. So just, because I know we have a lot of people joining us here on Zoom that aren't from this area. So if we're talking about how big of an area this is, we're talking about 60 degrees of latitude from Guam all the way over to actually just right out here in Hilo Bay. So we're covering a huge area. So currently with the uncorrected biomass estimates, there's 2 main biases Within a given habitat depth strata, species are uniformly distributed. We talked about that earlier with the counting the fish in the video. And also all individuals are counted within the survey. Again, we talked about that earlier with the video. But in reality, we're not really surveying just one particular type of habitat. This is a backscatter data map available from NOAA. As you can see, there's a huge variety of habitats at all different scales. But we're not accounting for zeros within any of it. We're accounting for the fish that's evenly distributed across one of those colors. I will go into the colors from colorblind. I'm sorry, I'm not going to try to butcher that right. Maybe I'm colorblind. So unlike terrestrial biologists, are also able to, I would say, easily go survey these. Humans don't do very well underwater for a long amount of time without scuba. So it's kind of hard for us to go out here and survey this every day, every month, without having some type of huge financial and logistical resources. The second bias is all individuals are counted within the survey. As you can see, I don't know if you can see it, there's a little yellow thing right there. And this was actually taken out here in Hilo Bay. So if we're saying that we counted all species or all individuals within the survey area, imagine this little yellow thing within your survey area. I mean, it's very easily missed if you're looking at all the parrotfish and all the other certain fishes, and maybe a jack comes by or shark or something like that. So this is just another one of the biases. We're not really able to count every single fish within our survey area. So we know our biases. We know how we get to count. So how do we come up with the same biomass, so the amount of species present in the habitat depth strata? So diagram 1, diagram 2 go down. We count the fish. We take the count and they change the length of the fish into weight. Those are applied to the area of the survey. So the biomass density, then a biomass density per site. And that is then turned into, calculated into a larger biomass per the habitat depth strata over a larger area. Call this the aerial expansion. So given now that we know how counts are done, how we come up with biases, the objectives of my study were to apply occupancy detection coefficients to same stock biomass estimation procedures, assess patterns of biases in the corrected same stock biomass estimates relative to the uncorrected original same stock biomass estimates, apply estimates of occupancy and detection to current same stock biomass estimates to describe any biases in the current estimates, and identify variability and influence on site-specific and survey-specific covariates on families of a targeted subset of tropical reef fish. There will be lots of fish pictures. I promise. So during my defense proposal, I didn't have any fish pictures, but I got teams on that. So I have lots of fish pictures for you, Dr. Peters. So talking about the Army of Senate. Sorry, I couldn't find it. So we have Conan the Warrior over here with occupancy estimation and modeling. So I used a single season occupancy model. All the surveys were completed around the same time, May, August, I believe. Each surveyor was considered a separate survey. So you have 2 cylinders. Each survey was considered a replicate. And both cylinders were modeled as one. So when we did the analysis, when we do the single season occupancy, both cylinders, since they're replicates, are just counted as one survey area. So the assumptions of the model, there's been 4 repeats. As I said, there was no repeat done during the initial data set. So we considered, I considered each cylinder as a repeat. Site independence, basically saying that no sites are going to overlap each other. There is heterogeneity or variability in both occupancy and detection displayed by covariates, and no misidentification of species. So from the data set, I was able to come up with 8 covariates, latitude, longitude. Habitat was kind of global. Habitat, we'll touch on that a little bit later on with categories. Depth was just the average depth of both divers. Average benthic coverage was within your cylinder. You have hard corals, microalgae, versus coralline algae, sand, so just percentage of coverage. Experience. So there was no. This is during the pandemic. Everybody knows stuff kind of shut down. So number of dives. So I contacted Noah. Noah said we can get it, but it's in the office, it's a pandemic, and blah blah blah. Okay, so let's just do number of dives per region by diver. We had a diver identification, but we didn't have a number of dives that they were experienced. So that's how I come up. That's how I come up with that. And diver specific basic coverage. So we have average basic coverage. Same time content myself here. And then diver specific was each individual percent coverage. And then effort. Dr. Mark Henderson, he was able to. I think we were eating carne asada in Reno. We come up with this idea about using the amount of gas consumption to come up with effort. So gas consumption is dependent on depth. So we knew the depth of the survey, giving that 90% of all scuba cylinders in the world are aluminum 80 with 3,000 psi. If we use 1,000 psi reserve, we can come up with a theoretical. I come up with theoretical non-decompression limit based off of European breathing standards for equipment. Or so there was two efforts: either they used up the gas first, or they hit the no decompression limit. And that time was the effort. I don't expect everybody to read these. Just know that there's 20 models. Model 1 is the null model. Number 20 is the global model. I also had to prepare the data. So when I got the data, it was in count. 5 fish, 20 fish, 150 fish. Those are turned into zeros and ones. So 1 being the fish species was present and able to be counted by the surveyors. At 0, there was 2 possibilities. It was available to be sampled, but was not seen, or it was just absent from the survey site. And as I spoke earlier about diver experience is the number of dives per region. So every single region that we move, even if the diver had previously surveyed a region, their experience restarted at 0. So once the data was prepared, once I knew my covariates, my modeling, the model I was going to use, I applied it to the biomass estimates. So as you can see, detection went into the count, which actually pushed the count number higher, depending on the estimate. And then occupancy went into the area, which ultimately pushed the same stock biomass to low. So we have one going up and one going down, somewhere in the middle, they met, and we come up with a corrected same stock biomass estimate. So the results. So just looking at this, it really doesn't tell us a whole bunch. Besides where model 15 was the highest frequency model within all the family. As you can see, latitude, longitude, depth experience. But when we look at it by family, we start to see some patterns exist. So models that didn't account for variability in detection or occupancy often have the smallest percentage of top models besides the cringe band, which we'll focus on here in a minute. So anything from 9 all the way down to 1. Really didn't, it was either occupancy or detection. It was either or. They didn't account for both. When covariates were considered for both occupancy and detections, model 14 through 20, there was a noticeable percentage of those models in the top models, as you can see by the graph. Experience, Williams et al. 2006 found that a lack of experience was easily recognized and mitigated. Variability in the amount of dives per region had at least some influence on the detectability of the survey. Effort is another, I wouldn't say excusable, it's easily explained. The more time you spend on surveys, the more fish you get. And the inclusion of latitude and longitude also showed some of the greatest influence on the top models. This is more than likely due just to the huge expanse and just regional habitat of the fishes. of some of the species. What isn't showing up is the individual cylinder biscuit coverage. I think this is just due to the metric or the scale used when it was considered habitat usage for each of the family data models. So now that we've looked at the models, we have the estimates, let's compare the uncorrected to the corrected version and come up with this really pretty rainbow graph. I'm totally not, I can actually do it. After models were applied to estimate the same stock biomass, I looked at the percent differences between the two. Along the x-axis here, you can see occupancy probability, y-axis detection. And the main thing to take away from this one is the more hotter or more wet it is, top left, the more likely it is, or it's suggested that the species is being overestimated. The more to the bottom right it is, or the purple. The more purple it is, the more it's being underestimated. That's part of the graphic part. So looking at each family data model, it looks like we're actually doing a pretty good job for the uncorrected, for the acanthurium. There's a few in there that are kind of out there. Species such as the self-intained, which are often avoid humans in the water, because they like to be eaten. You can see that here that they're being underestimated. But species like the Achilles, which is actually of interest, is another project we're doing right now, are actually overestimated. Again, this could just be simply because we're taking fish that are just rare on the reef. They're just not really there. We're applying the expansion method, this mean biomass density, to all the sites that they're not. So it's inflating the numbers that the uncorrected estimates are showing. For butterfly fishes, we aren't really doing a great job. So we're either overly underestimating some or grossly overestimating some. So as you can see, the ornate butterfly fish up here. If you've ever been in the water here in Hawaii, you've seen ornate, you know it's there. Again, they're also kind of rare on the reef. So the issues that face the Achilles things that we spoke about could also affect the species. The ferret butterfly fish down here, it's kind of odd that it come up underestimated. Every time I've been diving, I've seen this threat. Now that being said, maybe I just go to where they like to be. But since they're being underestimated, I think one of the issues that face them is that they could very well be being misidentified by surveyors because some of the line butterfly fish share similar coloration. If the water is turbid, if it's murky, if it's stressful, if there's a lot of them, they can very easily be identified. The wrasses were by far the most specious family out of all the models. As you can tell, there's more of them, and there's even more of them than you put pictures of. So for species such as Innocensus pavo, or the Nevadas, occupancy detection approach didn't really show any improvement for these rare species over the uncorrected biomass estimate. Because the area that they occupy just wasn't well surveyed. They like staying at the bottom, they like to hide. Divers approach them, they like to dip in there, and you just can't survey them. For species up here in the top left, again, you know, these are rare species that we're seeing we're applying into the overall area. So for the jack, the moo, and the snappers, as you can tell, there's a lot of species up here in the top left. Top left, not top right. This is probably more due to the species having large territorial areas. And so if we see one in one area, we're applying it to a larger area, which they just may not occupy because they do have such large territorial area. One paper out of Oahu said that the ulua, or the giant trevally, can sometimes traverse up to 5 kilometers in one day, going back and forth on the reef searching for food. That's a huge territory. So yeah, if you divers get in the water, they see one here, but they don't see one in other surveys. They're just going to apply that estimate to all the survey sites that they do within the area, when really, in reality, there's just one fish. For parrotfish, there's a lot of literature out there that say they don't. You know, they have that, predator influence on the humans coming down fishing for them. So it's no surprise that we're actually underestimating. Something to note, kind of secure about this, is that the state of Hawaii pushing new herbivore rules for the whole state, and so it might be of interest to them and other managers for herbivores or ecological service providers, period, to look at this and say, hey, you know, we might actually be underestimating some of the species that we're putting management efforts into. So, you know, it could kind of help make management decisions in the future. So I said we were going to talk about habitat. It's interesting that the habitat didn't show up in the top model. But when I did a PTA to look at the influence of what's influencing these species, habitat really popped up. I think this is mostly due to, as I said before, the metrics used to classify the habitat were just, they weren't adequate. Categories and modeling just don't tend to do very well. But it's interesting though, like I said, that these popped up, which just shows that they potentially could be 20-40 factors in the variability. But with the data set I had, it just wasn't close. And then when I looked at detection, nothing really popped up there. So yeah, that's really about that one. Thought there would be more. And finally, conclude. So species with low detection seem to be underestimated. Either they're thin on the reef, the wrong time of year or day, seasonality, or surveys just may not include a preferred area. Or there's cricket. That's a little bleeding right here. It's about the size of my teeth. Species with high detection seem to be overestimated. Either they're rare on the reef, as we talked about with the Achilles. Their territories can encompass many sites, such as we spoke about with the Alua. They're highly inquisitive or territorial, so they freely approach divers and go away and don't come back. And there's also potential for shallowing species as well. Menini here, it had a high detection, but it had a low occupancy, which kind of fits the same scheme as the Alua. But with that being said, you know, those fish are mostly seen in large groups, so that group can move around throughout the day. And then potential biases leading to current estimates being skewed. So selective biases, you know, site selection. Approximately 50% of the surveys in the data set were classified as aggregate reefs. All the surveys took place during the same time, so we might have missed seasons where fish might occupy a certain area or habitat. Survey design, 93% of the surveys took place on the fore reef, so we missed sandy habitat, missed walls, missed back reef, we missed all those other habitats. So they were there in the data set, they just weren't. And then no target species. I have this up here because there was no target species, but we weren't doing species-specific surveys. So the data set and how the surveys were conducted were not really designed for blinnies, gobies, or even this little teeper eye right here, which is found in deep water. So 3 of them were seen, actually here in the Hawaiʻi Islands, I think on a wall. So with that being said, we applied a mean biomass density of teeper eye to the whole Hawaiʻi Islands, to that area, which obviously they weren't because they don't occupy a habitat that was being surveyed. When I say deep water, we're talking 200, 300, 400 deep water. We're talking pretty deep. So the current uncorrected method has a broader interpretation of detection. Detection is whether a fish is there or not. not whether a fish could occupy the area, and just what we see. The design violates the assumption of surveying two separate sites, but they're treated as one. But it doesn't really seem to be an issue. The labs this past summer, we went out to Bobbie Bay, we did some surveys. This showed that if we took both surveyors, we put them in the middle, we surveyed the same exact area, there's only like a 5% difference between uncorrected and corrected biomass. So it doesn't really seem to be an issue. And all species were subjected to the same form of biomass estimation with no regard to occupancy detection. As I said from the beginning, the uncorrected biomass estimate analysis thing being done right now, doesn't account for occupancy detection in the analysis side of things. So I believe with minimal modification to the current analysis and design of the survey, we can improve things. We can make things better. Address the assumptions of closure or the fish swimming in and out of the cylinders, a priority before sampling begins. Temporal replication at any scale would be amazing. I know it's done most of the time, but as I discussed earlier, it's hard to get out there and do it weekly, monthly, especially when we're doing multiple sites in the water. Designing surveys to incorporate occupancy detection would really assist in these estimates. In quantitative habitat covariance at a categorical, there's a really interesting paper right now where they took an engineering problem to find the smoothness of the surface and they scaled it up to a coral reef. And so they're able to define that scale of ergosity based on the needs of the species they're looking at. Incorporating remote sensing data into habitat classification so ASU did some LiDAR flyovers of the island lately. Those are really amazing. They have 2 meter by 2 meter resolution. We're really able to tell, within this patch of habitat, how much of it is land, how much of it is live coral, how much of it is dead coral. It's really amazing. So just incorporating anything like that.
Yeah.
And then finally, looking at multi-state or multi-species occupancy modeling, looking at different states of abundance of species that we're modeling. Also looking at how one species might be influencing another species on the occupancy state. Could really move this further down the road.
She just redid her whole house and everything inside and out. Now she has 3 foot.
So conclusions: occupancy and detection modeling demonstrates design estimate of abundance obtained by biomass across coral reef fishes. Refinement and ground truthing is still really needed. This is the first time it's really been applied to a large number of species. So yeah, I mean, this is, it definitely needs to ground truthing. And the greatest potential for this is for exploited species of tropical coral reef fishes throughout the whole study area. And there's a number of species that are used for substance for small islands. Getting the handle on how many are really there in management would really be great. So takeaway, species with low detection seem to be underestimated. Species with high detection are overestimated, easy overestimated. Potential biases exist and should be addressed. And minimal modification in current design could really improve that. I would like to thank my committee, Dr. Bobbie, for putting up with me for 4 years. I know I should have been here for that long. Dr. Kittinger with NOAA for helping me throughout the pandemic get some data. Dr. Bell McKenzie, I know he's not, he might be on it, I don't know if he is. I sat down with him and he's one who really wrote the book that told me I'm just holding up. He was great. Ricky for helping me with some Dr. Williams, who's now he helped me too with some diver information. Mr. Hines, who wrote the our presence program that I use. He really kind of took my hand and kind of babysat me through some issues that was going on when I guess USGS was changing over the website. And then also the Western Pacific Fishery Management Council, Marla Spotter, they're kind enough to fund the technical reports that come out, which led to this presentation today. Alexandria Elbankian, we don't know who that is. She's awesome. She's made information free for everybody. And of course, all the HCFRU lab members who got.
Yeah.
Yeah. And finally, I want to be here today about my wife and kids. They kind of put up with me.
Yeah, that's pretty.
I love the medical career.
What'd you say? The hotels in Naples, Lori was able to secure for dirt, ERT.
At this point, I think you kind of know.
These rooms.
But yeah, and then my kid, you know, many times, unfortunately, I have to tell them, no, we can't go to the park, so I'm doing something like that.
Awesome, Sarasota.
So, I won't be here without them today.
It's
So,
like,
really appreciate it.
yeah, it's fun.
So, if you have any questions, I've heard you.
Sarasota.